Yo, what's up guys? JetXC here and welcome to another Brown Dust 2 video. So, if you saw my last video, I was going over some Reddit questions about team comps and team building in general, right? And I'll link that video at the end of this video and in the description, but I wanted to go over an overall general idea for team building. And I'm just going to simply split it up into like three different parts, which is going to be like early, mid, and late game team building. Just to kind of make it make sense for everybody, because I see it pop up a lot, even in my comment sections, like, hey, how do you build this? How do you build that? And a lot of people are coming from the collab for Mushoku Tensei, so I don't blame them, right? They want to get the Roxy costume. They want to get the, I guess the one specifically for Brown Dust 2 here, the Succubus costume, the Emerging Desire one, right? So I definitely don't blame them at all. Right, so let's kind of get into it. So real quick, I just want to explain, I'm someone who's kind of gotten through all the content for the most part. I haven't defeated the last one just because I just haven't gotten to it yet. I play Mirror Wars as well. I haven't done Mirror Wars in like 4 days, so I'm usually anywhere between like top 500 and 1,000. Um, and the reason being is my defense team isn't the best, to be honest. I really got to work on it, but I've got a huge win rate for my offensive team. So yeah, that's a little bit on me and my profile for my units. So let's get into it, guys. So again, we're gonna split this up, and we're not gonna make this video too long. But there's three time. There's well, let's word it like this: early, mid, and late game. For early game, a lot of you are just starting. You're just beginning. You're trying to get through like the first 4 to 5 chapters of the game, right? When you start this game, you're going to get a lot of characters. You're going to get characters like Arines. You're going to get characters like Cry. You're going to get characters like Justia, right? You're going to start off with some pretty solid characters. Even Gray. You'll start off with characters like Gray even. When you get these characters, use them, right? Use who you got. Use any of the 4 stars or 3 stars to your advantage. I used to use Beatrice a lot, all the way up until probably like chapter 8. I used to use Beatrice, and the reason I did was because I liked her skill animation. So if you've seen Beatrice's skill animation, you'll know what I'm saying. So but use who you get. Now most of the units you get at the beginning will be physical units. You can use magic damage units, but you won't get as many magic damage units at the beginning. You can do a mix of magic and physical, absolutely, right? But I would suggest just taking the units that they give you, which will mostly be physical, and starting out with that. Now, if you're building a team of Justia, Cry, maybe Scheherazade, because you get her pretty early, Arenas, right? Build whoever you want to build, and just take those characters and push your way at the beginning of the game, right? That'll be your early game. You'll start to build rare gear. You'll get that. You'll have common gear, and then you'll eventually get rare gear. And then once you unlock rare gear, that's when you'll just plow through the early game with your characters. So I would say use whoever you want to use for the most part, but make sure you're using Justia for sure, Cry for sure, Gray for sure, Leatrice for sure, right? Justia especially. If anybody, Justia and Cry will get you through a lot of the content. And you don't necessarily have to use a buffer. Now, a buffer is someone like Arines, and buffers essentially just give you a power up, right? So at +5, Arines will give you 70% increase in attack and crit rate by 30%. So you don't necessarily need a buffer at the beginning, but if you want to use one, it will help you plow through things even more. And you'll get a bunch of free copies of these characters in their costumes, so keep that in mind, right? So for physical and magical damage units, you're mostly going to run into physical, but if you want to build magic damage, you can, but you're probably going to have to start off with a mix of magical and physical damage, which is completely fine. Now, that's early game. Mid game. Mid game, you will start to build rare gear, and this is something I'm going to say. I will have a link in the video, in the description. I need you guys to really pay attention once you get to mid game, which I mean, I can't necessarily pinpoint mid game exactly. I think after you get through like the first 7 chapters, then you're like for sure in mid game, because that's when you've unlocked a lot of the stuff that you need and you have a pretty basic understanding of the game. And you want to start doing a lot of the other things like Evil Castle. Maybe you want to see what PvP is like, a bunch of other stuff, right? You want to make sure you understand the gearing system. And I will have a link in the description for gearing and why rare gear is so important. Rare gear is so important to the point where you will have certain characters with rare gear even in like late game content. Trust me. Rare gear is just that good. And the reason being is because the difference between rare and SR gear is very minimal. But there is one SR gear piece that you should build. But I don't want to get into that. Please check out the video because this is strictly team building. So when you get mid game, you want to at least build one support unit, because you're going to get to the point where you're not going to be doing the damage you need in order to beat a lot of the healthier units with just a ton of health. And you'll start to realize that support units are going to be a requirement. So Arenas, like I said, she gives you attack and she gives you crit rate. And when you're building your rare gear, you don't necessarily have to look for certain stats. Just keep building your rare gear and you'll come around to getting attack percentage, crit rate, crit damage. But you're going to want to build rare gear, make sure you get tier 4, and build up your support so you can get that extra attack buff and crit rate from the support. And crit rate will allow you to do crit damage for your heavy damage dealing units, right? Like a Leatrice, like a Justia, right? So again, check out the video on gear and why it's so important, because it goes more into crit rate builds and crit damage builds, and why crit damage will eventually for late game be the most important thing when it comes to building a late game team in general. So yeah, for late game, or excuse me, for mid game, no matter what, you need at least one support. Now, you can do 2, and there's sometimes where you might actually need 2. So Arenas, B. Helena, Diana, where are they? Let me give you one more example here. Even Same, right? But preferably someone that will give you a crit rate buff, like Red Riding Hood Row. She will give you a crit rate buff, and she'll also give you Energy Guard. Same boosts magic damage, so if you've got a magic damage team, she'll give you just attack percentage increase. And wow, hang on, let me at least find B. Helena or Diana. Where are they? Oh, okay, here they are. Wow. But yeah, so B. Helena here, like, she'll give you increased magic damage and crit rate at +5, right? So if you were wanting to look at what +0 is like, it's 25%. But even still, you want to use these buffer units. So again, there's going to be some times where it's probably best to use 2 support units, but at least required 1 and have that character built as well. So that's mid game. Late game. Late game, this is where you're starting to build ultra rare gear. This is where you understand the value of crit damage. You obviously, you see my video or you already understand gear in general. This is where you need buffers, 2 buffers for sure if you're going through a lot of late game content, whether it be Evil Castle, whether it be Tower of Desire, whether it be a lot of the story mode from like I would say like chapter 9 and on is where it's like pretty much after chapter 9, it's for sure late game. But that's where you definitely need 2 buffers, right? So Diana and B. Helena, for example, these 2 combined will give me 80% crit. So at +5, I get 30%. +5 B. Helena, I get 50%. So I will get an 80% crit rate buff, and I will be able to use crit damage in order to do a lot of damage. At +0, she's 20%. And for B. Helena, I think it's 25%. So even if you don't have fully +5 costumes, if you use 2 units, you will get a 50% crit rate buff at least, right? Which is just a coin flip, which is still good, right? And the reason why crit rate is so important is because late game, you're going to be building these ultra rare gear, right? So here's my gear. Here's what it's looking like. I've built these up. And if we take a look at my gear stats, magic attack at 1,000, I have crit damage at 576%, which is huge, guys. So my Lowen will be doing tons and tons of damage. And again, I go over that in my gear tips video. So, but you've probably seen a lot of videos of where you'll just see someone doing tons of damage with Leatris, Lowen, Eclipse, right? There's plenty of examples, but you're 100% going to need 2 buffers, and you're going to want to start building UR gear on your damage dealers and building crit damage for sure, right? And that's the biggest thing. And that's the meta right now. In PvP, there's some instances of people building crit rate, but that's a whole different meta. I'm just talking about general PvE, getting through the content, team building. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. I don't want to make this video too long. So you've got early, mid, late. Early game, use whoever you want. Get through all the content as best you can. Mid game, you're going to want at least 1 support for sure. You're going to start building rare gear. And sometimes you may need 2 support units. Late game, 100% you need 2 buffer support units. That's why on the tier list, supports are like tier 0. They're at the top, especially the ones that give you crit rate. They're the most important. But yeah, guys, that is it from me. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me in the comments. I am out of here. Thanks for watching. Later.